On an island where people forget to die, insomnia barely exists. 80-year-old Greeks sleep like teenagers. No pills, no melatonin, no sleep apps. The answer has been sitting in their cups every night for centuries. And the third thing they do before bed? Researchers almost ignored it because it seemed too obvious to matter. It was the most important finding in the entire study. Eleni Mazzari is 87 years old. Every evening around 9, when the Aegean light turns copper over the hills of Ikaria, she walks barefoot to her kitchen, fills a small brass breaky with water, and drops in a handful of dried mountain herbs she picked herself that morning. She drinks it slowly on her terrace. No television, no phone. By 10:15, she is asleep. She will not wake until dawn. She has done this every single night for over 60 years. She does not know what melatonin is. Now meet Karen. She is 58, nearly 30 years younger. She takes 2 milligrams of melatonin every night. She has a white noise machine. She downloaded 3 sleep apps last year. She still lies awake most nights until midnight, checking the time on her phone, wondering why nothing works. Her doctor told her poor sleep is just part of aging. Here is the number that explains the gap between these two women. A 2009 study from the University of Athens, published in Cardiology Research and Practice, found that Ikarians over 65 reported chronic insomnia at roughly 1/3 the rate of the average Greek population and a fraction of the rate seen in Americans of the same age. On an island with no sleep clinics and no pharmacies stocking sleep aids, people were sleeping better than anywhere in the industrialized world. And at the end, I will tell you about the one thing Ikarian elders do every single night that no sleep specialist ever mentions when they talk about insomnia after 60. It is not a food. It is not a tea. And the researchers almost missed it because it seemed too simple to matter. You will want to stay for that. You have been told that poor sleep after 60 is inevitable, that your circadian rhythm degrades, that melatonin production declines, and the only option is to supplement it. That logic sounds reasonable. It is wrong. A 2022 meta-analysis published in the Journal of the American Medical Association examined 23 randomized controlled trials involving over 6,000 participants and found that exogenous melatonin increased total sleep time by an average of just 3.9 minutes, less than 4 minutes. The supplement industry built a $2 billion market around a molecule that buys you less time than it takes to boil water. Meanwhile, the side effects, morning grogginess, disrupted REM architecture, dependency on external dosing that further suppresses the body's own production, those are well documented. Americans over 60 now spend roughly $900 a year on sleep-related products. Supplements, weighted blankets, smart mattresses, prescription hypnotics. And the chronic insomnia rate in American adults over 65 sits near 48%, nearly half. On Ikaria, where the total annual spending on sleep aids is functionally zero, the rate is a fraction of that. Here is what Ikarians understood without a single clinical trial. Sleep is not a problem to be solved with a product. Sleep is the output of a system. Fix the system and sleep fixes itself. 3 practices regulate that system in Ikaria, practices that operate on the same pathways modern sleep medicine tries to target with pills. Nervous system regulation, blood glucose stability through the night. And a third element that is not biological at all. I will get to that one last. Tier 1, the foundation. Every evening in Ikaria, you will see the same scene repeated in almost every home. A small pot on the stove, dried herbs, hot water. What Ikarians drink before bed is not chamomile from a box. It is sideritis, mountain tea, hand-gathered from wild plants that grow in the rocky hillsides above the villages. Ikarians call it Sai Tu Vonu, tea of the mountain. Eleni gathers hers twice a week. She has a cloth bag that she has used for 40 years. A 2011 study published in the Journal of Physiology and Pharmacology found that sideritis scardica significantly reduced anxiety-related behavior and promoted GABAergic activity in the central nervous system. GABA is the primary inhibitory neurotransmitter, the molecule responsible for calming neural activity before sleep. Mountain tea increases it naturally without the dependency cycle of pharmaceutical GABA agonists like benzodiazepines. But it is not just the GABA pathway. A 2017 study from Aristotle University of Thessaloniki, published in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology, identified potent antioxidant and anti-inflammatory compounds in sideritis, including apigenin, a flavonoid that binds to the same brain receptors as anti-anxiety medications, but without sedation, dependency, or withdrawal. Here's the protocol. Step 1. Source whole dried sideritis, not tea bags, not extract capsules. The whole dried flowering stalks. Step 2. Bring 1 cup of water to a boil, remove from heat, add a small handful of dried herb, roughly 2 to 3 grams. Step 3. Let it steep for 7 to 10 minutes, covered. Drink it warm, not hot, roughly 30 to 45 minutes before you intend to sleep. The most common mistake. People brew it alongside dinner or drink it 2 hours before bed while watching television. The timing matters. Ikarians drink this tea in a specific window, in a specific setting, quiet, unhurried, with nothing else competing for their attention. The practice and the compound work together. If you drink it while scrolling your phone, you have kept the chemistry and destroyed the context. The context is half the mechanism. Take a moment right now and think about the last thing you consumed before bed last night. Think about where you were, what you were doing, how much light was hitting your eyes. That is your current Tier 1. This is only about 35% of the system. Tier 2, the amplifier. Here is where most Western sleep advice goes wrong. You have been told to avoid eating before bed, that a full stomach disrupts sleep. 4 heavy, processed, high glycemic foods. That is true. But Ikarians eat before bed every night. What they eat is the critical difference. The typical Ikarian evening meal, consumed between 7:30 and 8:30, is small and built on a foundation of wild greens, what they call horta, foraged plants like dandelion, chicory, purslane, and amaranth, dressed in local olive oil and paired with a spoonful of raw honey, sometimes with a small piece of sourdough bread. This is not accidental. This is the second mechanism. A 2018 study published in Nutrients found that diets rich in wild leafy greens were associated with significantly higher magnesium intake, and that magnesium status was directly correlated with sleep quality in older adults. Magnesium activates the parasympathetic nervous system. It regulates melatonin production endogenously, from within, not from a capsule. The wild greens of Ikarian contain 2 to 3 times the magnesium of commercially farmed spinach or kale. Then there is the honey. A tablespoon of raw, unprocessed honey before sleep does something specific. It restocks liver glycogen. When liver glycogen drops during the night, the brain triggers a cortisol spike, the stress hormone, to mobilize emergency glucose. That cortisol spike is the 3 a.m. wake-up that affects millions of people over 60. The Ikarian practice of honey before bed prevents it, not by sedation, by stabilizing the metabolic environment the brain needs to stay asleep. Here is the protocol for Tier 2. At dinner, roughly 2 to 3 hours before bed, eat a small plate of dark leafy greens, any variety available to you, dressed in a tablespoon of good olive oil. Then, within 30 minutes of sleep, take 1 tablespoon of raw honey, directly or stir it into your mountain tea. The greens provide magnesium for nervous system regulation. The honey prevents the cortisol wake-up. Together with the sideritis tea, you have addressed 2 of the 3 biological mechanisms that Ikarian's elders regulate without knowing the science behind any of them. You now understand roughly 60% of this system. What comes next is the layer that even people who know the research tend to miss. What we do in the West. We spend $900 a year on melatonin, sleep trackers, weighted blankets, prescription hypnotics, and smart mattresses. We optimize our bedrooms with blackout curtains and temperature controls. We read books about sleep hygiene and set phone alarms to remind us to stop looking at our phones. What Ikarians do? They drink a cup of wild tea that costs nothing. They eat greens from the hillside. They take a spoonful of honey. Their total investment is functionally zero. The Ikarians had a sleep clinic in their kitchen garden, not a cabinet full of capsules. Here is the ingredient I promised you. Except it is not an ingredient. It is a practice. Every night in Ikarian, the evening is not a solo activity. Eleni does not drink her tea alone. Her neighbor Katerina comes by. Sometimes her cousin Despina. They sit on the terrace. They talk about nothing consequential. The tomatoes, the wind, a grandchild's visit next week. There is no agenda, no urgency. The conversation has no endpoint because no one is checking the time. This is the caffeinio culture extended to the home. Social presence without stimulation. A 2010 longitudinal study from Brigham Young University, published in PLOS Medicine and involving over 308,000 participants, found that social connection reduced the risk of premature death by 50% and was a stronger predictor of sleep quality than any supplement, medication, or behavioral intervention. Loneliness activates the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, the stress system, and keeps cortisol elevated through the night. Chronic loneliness, which affects over 43% of American adults over 60, is one of the strongest predictors of chronic insomnia. The researchers almost missed it because it seemed too simple to be the answer. It is the answer. The third tier is not a compound. It is the presence of another person in the last hour of your day. The Ikarian system works because the tea calms the nervous system, the food stabilizes blood glucose, and the company down-regulates the stress axis. Remove any one of these three and the system degrades. Keep all three and you have what Eleni has had every night for 60 years. Effortless, uninterrupted sleep without a single product. Here is the complete system. Tier 1. Brew 1 cup of Sideritis Mountain Tea 30 to 45 minutes before sleep. Whole dried herb, not capsules, not tea bags. Steep 7 to 10 minutes. Drink it warm, in a quiet setting with no screens. Tier 2. At dinner, eat a plate of dark leafy greens with olive oil. Within 30 minutes of sleep, take 1 tablespoon of raw, unprocessed honey in the tea or on its own. Tier 3. Spend the final 30 to 60 minutes of your evening in the unhurried presence of another person. No screens, no agenda, just presence. Here is what the timeline looks like. In the first 7 days, you will notice something subtle. Not dramatic improvement, a slight shift. You fall asleep a few minutes faster. You wake up slightly less groggy. After 30 days, the 3 a.m. cortisol wake-up begins to fade. Your body starts trusting its own rhythm again. After 90 days, the change becomes measurable. Get a blood panel. Ask for cortisol and C-reactive protein. Compare it to your baseline. At 6 months, sleep becomes what it was always supposed to be. Not something you manage, but something that simply happens. Here is where we started. An 87-year-old woman on a Greek island, barefoot in her kitchen, boiling herbs she picked that morning, drinking them on her terrace with a neighbor while the Aegean turns dark. No pills, no apps, no effort. We look at that image and most of us feel two things at once, admiration and distance, like it belongs to a different world. But the University of Athens data, the Aristotle University studies, the BYU longitudinal research, they all point to the same conclusion. This is not destiny. This is practice. The Ikarians who moved to Athens and abandoned these habits lost their sleep advantage within a generation. The habits maintained across a lifetime produce the biology. The action for tonight: boil water. If you can find Sideritis, use it. If not, start with any loose-leaf herbal tea, no caffeine. Drink it in a quiet room. Put your phone in another room. If someone is nearby, sit with them for 20 minutes. That is Tier 1, Day 1. If you want more systems from all 5 blue zones, subscribe. Every week we go this deep. Every protocol is sourced from real research. No supplements to sell. No products to push. Just the actual systems these populations have been using for generations. Tell me in the comments, what is the last thing you do before bed right now? And can you fall asleep within 15 minutes of lying down? I read every single comment, and your answer might shape the next video.